Welcome back to the show, Harry Litman. You know, normally I don't have certain guests back as frequently as I have you. But right now, the mishigas, the craziness, the insanity that's taking place in DC, there was really only one person that I can go to, and that is Air Controller Harry Litman. So look, Harry. So Harry, look, according to Reuters, Trump's new tariff arrangement with the UK was announced without any parliamentary vetting or input from US trade officials. Question I want to ask you, what are the constitutional or the legal ramifications when a president sidesteps Congress the way that Trump did to cut trade deals, especially those that favor political allies over economic logic?
Thanks as always for having me, Michael. It's just a weird time in history that some of these legal things that are so fine-grained really seem to matter for like regular life, as a country. Your point is so well taken and so cross-cutting. So he does this again and again and again. Now, anything about whom he should consult, like trade officials, etc., they're going to take this maximalist position that I don't care. I can consult anyone I want within the executive branch. There may be norms that said I always have had to do it, but I'm going to do what I want. But your point about Congress, some of this goes to almost nomenclature, but it seems the definite better view is one person's tariff is another person's tax, and who has the unquestioned, not just priority, but exclusive power to impose taxes, that would be the Congress. And there is really order after order after order that just have him weeding in Congress's garden. Now, Congress, of course, has been totally supine. Just roll over us, please, Mr. President. Well, the tariffs is one place in which that might be coming apart a little because he's got such a very razor thin kind of margin. This, it's, a deal with UK. It's the kind of thing he probably always contemplated. I'll talk tough and then back down and declare victory. But whether or not there are now some lawsuits out there not brought by Congress saying you can't do this. This is Article 1, not Article 2, pal. And that will be served up for the courts. Notice in general where we are, Michael, only 110 days or so in. All the sort of litigation skirmishes have been this preliminary, emergency relief, temporary injunction. So the courts are only now turning to the merits of questions like, can you do this with the Alien Enemies Act? Can you do this to law firms? And this big hovering question, his whole tariffs thing, although, who knows what will remain of it in a week or 6 weeks, but then he'll come back. To what extent is it, in fact, unconstitutional as a really fundamental violation of separation of powers because it's Congress's ballywick? So the consultation, very smart, very normal, very traditional, but probably not constitutionally required. But the weeding in Congress's garden, that's a violation, will remain a violation. And the courts are going to turn to it in broad gauge form, I think, but not for some months.
Yeah. Meanwhile, this was being touted for days now, like a cliffhanger from the movie. Remember the TV show Dallas, right? Who killed JR? And then you're going to have to wait till next season, right, in order to find out who actually shot JR. It's the same thing, this big, ba, 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 ba. Let me be very clear. I didn't see anything significant here. In fact, UK is one of the few countries that we have a trade surplus with. So why beat up the person that you're actually making money on if your entire ideology is premised on everyone's ripping us off. We've been ripped like no one's ever seen before, right? Do you ever notice he says that line all the time? Nobody's ever seen this before. Nobody's ever seen it, right?
Yeah, it really is true. It's amazing. People are telling me that no one's ever seen this before.
People have been telling me no one's ever seen this. Right. Meanwhile, I was reading the Financial Times, and they're reporting that the EU are actually preparing retaliatory tariffs in response to Trump's unilateral duties on steel and auto imports and everything else. That they're not going to take it the way that the UK is. They're just now getting together and they're coming up with a strategic plan, not one country against everybody, but rather it'll be five countries against one, acting in concert and unison as allies generally do. You think that this could trigger a trade war under the WTO, World Trade Organization? And what tools, if any, do you think that the U.S. courts would have in order to rein in a president who uses trade policy as political vengeance? Because that's how I see this.
There's not the slightest doubt, or as just power, and for him, power and the ability to intimidate, humiliate, exact vengeance are one and the same. So, I detect the typical Trump MO of talking tough, then caving, and then, as I say, declaring victory. That's what, I think any economist would say that this UK overture is only a good thing. And that, but it leaves everyone else still out in the cold. And yeah, they are fighting back. The short answer to your question legally, Michael, is not a lot. And absent some showing of this first Article 1, Article 2 separation of powers problem, like this is Congress's lookout guy. There's not it really is basically a political question, but it's a very pungent one here, it seems to me. I heard a speech yesterday by David Brooks, and he talked about the different times in America and how we'd escaped the bullets of tyranny. And he said because they totalitarian leaders tend to screw up, and he sees the tariffs as exactly that for Trump. He thinks Trump is going down eventually with having sustained a lot of damage based on the tariffs, but that would, because we are seeing that now, the tariffs. What did I just see? A car is it from Canada is going to be 20% more. I mean, it's really hurting people, and it is peeling away the lockstep total sycophancy of individuals in Congress and the Senate. So the bad news legally is not a lot of legal tools, unless he's, trying to get away with taxation. The good news, though, is political, where this really might be the thing that peels away some of these members of Congress. And to my mind, this dynamic, because you hear again and again, they hate him, they don't trust him, they don't like the policies, but they're scared of him. Once a little bit of daylight is created between a few senators, enough members of Congress, I think it's the kind of thing that creates momentum. But to me, the pushbacks here are going to be, again, asterisk to the Article 1, Article 2 thing, are going to be almost exclusively political, not legal.
But, I'm glad you brought up that point where the things he's doing they're beginning to isolate a slew of these House Republicans against him. For example, according to the Washington Post, House Republicans are melting down over the so-called big, beautiful bill. I mean, I don't know if you saw that. Right. Called the big, beautiful bill. It's big and it's beautiful.
That's another thing he says a lot. Everything's beautiful.
Everything's
the
beautiful.
Perfect conversation and the beautiful bill.
Big, beautiful bill, which, with moderates now refusing to back it unless border provisions are strict. Can you do me a favor? Can you walk my listeners through the legal mechanism for when a bill is introduced as political theater rather than genuine legislation?
Wow. So I'll try, although that's less illegal and more, as you say, theatrical. But first, on this point, I just want to point out, they're all scared and craven, right? And they're scared specifically that Elon Musk will fund a primary challenge, whatever. But now you have individuals who are up and vulnerable in the midterms, and the town halls and popular sentiment have shown real pushback, unpopularity for Trump. People are feeling this personally, and that's the kind of thing that creates a hole. All right, the short answer to your question is it's almost completely in the purview of Mike Johnson whether something gets to the floor. Then it's what committees it goes to. The committees then will do things and then permit something to go to the floor as a whole. And we've barely begun. At that point, there's still debate on the floor, which normally doesn't matter for anything. But then there's a bill in the other house, here, the Senate. Then there's the reconciliation conference, where they, take their the differences, and there's going to be on tariffs really significant differences between the House and the Senate. They try to harmonize them into a single bill to present to the president, and even if the president signs it, there's still these tricks and maneuvers over whether, and we're seeing Trump really play in this field, past appropriated money by Congress will in fact be given out, or does the executive still have some tricks to say, I know Congress did this, but guess what? I'm withholding it. That begins to be a legal issue. Everything else I've talked about in terms of the bill coming to the floor, the kinds of things that happen in markup, in the conference, etc., are matters of custom and sort of turf, and they are very strong. No one, even as Trump has totally upended practice in the executive branch, the Congress still has its old ways here, both the Senate and the House. But the short answer is, again, this is something that if the American people really object to, it's just what they're doing that is the way to create pressure rather than lawsuits. These town halls where they're giving them hell, and all the story after story about I can't afford healthcare, etc. That's the basic thing. It's another way of putting this, Michael, is what we're talking about until the very end is all within a kind of constitutional black box. Goes into Congress, shit happens, comes out of Congress. And what happens within that box is very typically not the province of the courts, but the province of norms, general practices within the Congress.
Yeah, because we're watching as the slew of very high-ranking Republicans turning around and saying, you know what, we've allowed this to go on just a little bit too far now. And right. There are things that they're trying to do, meaning this administration, that we just will not go along with. So in essence,
and my calls are running 5-1 against. They track that.
Yeah. And we're watching this real-time dysfunction in the GOP, where in the GOP you have infighting, there's massive infighting, right? I mean, did you watch as Marjorie Toilet Green was smashing that gavel? Talk about crazy, right? 50 times she's banging the gavel. Do you know how many times she's played bullshit antics while speaking? Because now all of a sudden, somehow or another, she becomes the chair of any committee. Right. It goes to show you how fucked up we are as a country. But you got the GOP infighting. You have all this procedural sabotage. You have rules that are being suspended. The question I want to ask you, oh great one, is there any precedent for a party in power obstructing its own president's legislative agenda this destructively?
That's now a rich historical question, paging Mr. Beschloss or paging Ms. Goodwin. I'm always, as you're a father, I'm a father. I always responded to the questions of, has it ever happened? Is there anyone saying like, probably.
Right.
But this
Twice.
particular dynamic, let me put it this way. As you and many have pointed out, I mean, historians are going to be puzzling over this and tackling it, but Trump figures exist in society. Maybe there was one 20 years ago, 30 years from now, who's just going to live his or her whole life out in a basement somewhere. Adolf Hitler was a failed artist, and Trump was a really fifth-rate reality TV star. They've come to the fore. They're evil in and of themselves, but the role of Congress here, enabling and effectuating it, cannot, knowing that it's not just all based on lies, but really damaging to the country, cannot be, here's a cliche, but I think it's right, cannot be overstated. So has it ever happened? There's I'm kind of thinking of the 1840s and 1850s and the destruction of the Whig Party, blah, blah, blah. But I think your listeners don't look to me for history. I'll totally plant a flag on this. It is A, frigging hugely unusual, if not singular, and B, more importantly, hugely damaging in terms of letting Trump come into power and do his, level worst to totally savage the country in so many ways. There's just not enough emphasis, and there's a lot, but on the blame to be accorded the totally pliant. I mean, look, who's against him now? Mitch McConnell, and that's as like left as it get, right? And within the Congress and within the Senate, they have enabled it. They'll have to answer to history. I think they will answer to history. But if you could blink your eyes and the biggest alternate universe to create is where McConnell does the right thing, and after saying he should be impeached, actually votes to do it. But you just blink your eye and remove 2 or 3 people in this. We don't have any of these idiot, inane, imbecilic cabinet officers like Hegseth, and we don't have his, ability to terrorize both the country and the Senate. So it's huge, and if not unprecedented, really, really unusual and consequential.
I mean, since we're talking about unusual, how about Chief Justice John Roberts, literally just made a very rare public remark defending the judiciary from Trump's tirades. And I'm going to quote this, saying, "We don't wear red or blue robes." Harry, let me ask you this. What's the historical significance of a Chief Justice rebuking a sitting president? And can that translate into tangible action from the court? I understand, Justice Roberts. In fact, I have been saying it now, literally almost since the day Trump took office. When Trump told you he intends to dismantle our tripartite system, we've already watched as he's dismantling the legislative branch, right? One policy, one executive order after another. But he's been doing that same shit to the judiciary, locking up a judge, wanting to have a federal court judge removed from the bench because he didn't like a ruling. Chief Justice Roberts figured out if he could do that to a sitting federal court judge, remember, my listeners, federal court judges are appointed by the President of the United States, and they too have a life tenure. If you could do that to a sitting federal court judge, why would you not be able to do it to a sitting Supreme Court justice?
No reason except just sort of sheer power politics and would the people go along, et cetera. But you're right. So sort of a 2-part question. How rare? Very rare. In the modern era, a lot has changed with Supreme Court practice. way back when they were, the whole federal system was sort of this, secondary thing, all the action in the states. Then really that changed basically after the Civil War and different role, but really things have changed a lot culturally for the court since about 1980. And since then, the only parallel I can think of is when Roberts did it himself after the calls for impeachment based on what, it's so clear that nobody in the Republican caucus, much less Donald Trump, had any idea what this very respected centrist judge had done, but just had ruled against Trump. So he came out then. Typically, they are so careful only to speak when they're supposed to. That means for the annual speech to Congress or from the bench asking questions. So it is really big. Let's start there. What does it portend, or what are the laws that they can do to sort of push back? The court is passive and things have to come to them. And what he's saying, you can sort of see as a kind of pyramid problem by which I mean some people could take heart from it, others not, because the Supreme Court, almost certainly with Roberts in the majority, basically permitted this totally vicious and unreasoned order from Trump and Hegseth saying no transgender persons can serve in the military to go into effect, and probably because they're thinking they need to defer in some way, even though there's nothing to defer to here because these guys are liars, don't have real rationale, etc. But you could take it. Look, and the number one biggest showdown, I think, to date, which was the Alien Enemies Act and the idea that there's any due process, but the court was in the right place. 9-0 was in the right place, and in a different way, 7-2 was in the right place. So it is sort of a warning, but I'll say this at a minimum. We've always been afraid with a different court, the court that would be in place, but for, say, Mitch McConnell, we would know there was this total wall and bulwark and we would rest easier at night. We don't have that. We have a porous wall, and Roberts is sometimes the very pores, at certain places. And the question that this decision 2 days ago serves up is, are they going to let him get away with it without reviewing because he says it's national security? Like he said for the law firms, it's national security. Give me
everything is national security.
Exactly, that's what he wants. But will they? If they approve half of that, that's bad. To wrap up the question, I know I can go on a little professorially long, but it's really significant. He's saying, don't try us too hard. Don't assume we're going to roll over. That's pretty big. Not to say the message will come home. But then what will it matter? It'll only matter in a concrete case where the court, flexes its muscles and says, no, you cannot go there. Here are 5 or 6 or 7, even 9 of us to say, we're not going to give you a blank check. And that's going to be the question.
You ever wake up after a week of nonstop political chaos, look at yourself in the mirror and think, damn, I aged like a president in his second term. Yeah, well, me too. Long days, longer news cycles, and a diet that consists mostly of rage and revenge will do just that to you. That's why I gave Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet a shot. And let me tell you, it's like a full body reset without the misery of actually fasting. Prolon's a plant-based nutrition program of soups, snacks, teas that keeps your body in a fasting state while still feeding you. It works at the cellular level to jumpstart rejuvenation and help your cells act like they've just had a motivational speaker and a green juice. It's real science. It's real results. And now, boom, they've rolled out the next-gen 5-day program. And now, boom, they've rolled out the next-gen 5-day program. It's 100% organic soups and teas, richer flavor, and ready-to-eat meals. So even a certain president couldn't screw it up. Developed over decades at USC's Longevity Institute and backed by legitimate top medical centers, Prolon has been shown to support biological age reduction, metabolic health, skin appearance, fat loss, and energy. Look, I did the 5-day program, and no joke, I felt better, lighter, cleaner. Now I'm all in for next gen. And here's the deal for my Mea Culpa listeners. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new next gen at special savings. Prolon is offering Mea Culpa with Michael Cohen listeners 15% off site-wide, plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. So go now and visit prolonlife.com/Mea Culpa. That's PROLONLIFE.com/Mea Culpa to claim your 15% discount as well as your bonus gift. That's prolonlife.com/Mea Culpa. Give your body a break. It deserves it. Believe me.
Which is hysterical because even when it was a 9-0, Trump declared that loss as the victory by turning around and saying, well, that's not the way we read it. It's amazing, right? That you can
well, more than that, I don't know if you noticed,
people.
they've been talking out of both sides of their mouth all the time, but in court, Judge Boasberg totally pinned the DOJ. They got this totally wrong, correct? And he basically had to admit in court this Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, complete bullshit, upside down answer is wrong. It's just wrong. Yeah.
But then again, you have Trump has allies there in the Supreme Court, such as Justice Alito, Justice Thomas. These two ass clowns are openly dismissing Roberts' calls for independence. I mean, I am blown away at the level of, I don't even know what to call it. It's not grift. It's certainly not stupidity. It's something. Yeah. Does this signal to you a legitimate constitutional crisis, or is it just some, public posturing? Because there are these internal tensions that we don't see going on within the court. What do you think it is, constitutional or public?
Yeah. First, it's a great question. Second, I'll remind you.
Harry, when I'm fortunate to have the great Harry Litman here on Mea Culpa, let me be very clear here. All right. I got to ask the right questions.
Okay. Well, you did. Anyway, and I just want to remind there, even Alito and Thomas were in the right place, coming up from there's some due process. But to me, and now we're sort of in pop psychology, a place I promise not to go with Trump or have given up. But this general mindset that I think is really big in this country of sort of furor and resentment at a perceived kind of liberal, woke idea, all this stuff that I think is way, way, way over. I understand where the germ of it, but I don't, trying to define the Democratic Party. And so I think they're way out of control. To me, I perceive Alito and Thomas in that place. That is, I see them as driven by a kind of choking resentment. And I think it matters that they're older than Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Barrett, and came of age at a time when conservatives were just generally disparaged, and that's true. But so I think my answer would be the second, door number two, just in the sense that there are things they do that they can't imagine are completely faithful to the law, and certainly are not heeding the call of the Chief Justice to try to show unanimity and at such important speaking moments for the court. And I think it's less that their views are even more extreme legally and more this kind of, sense that I think has in a different form really gripped the country. An interesting thing about them, next month, at the end of next month, or maybe very early the following, the court's going to be done for the year, for the term. They'll rise to sit the first Monday in October. Alito and Thomas, one of them might resign. I think, A, they don't seem to like the job very much, but also B, they totally want to get a young Turk in to have another 30 or 40 years of very conservative influence. And if Trump gets clobbered in the midterms, it changes that dynamic. So we'll see. But I'd give it 50-50 odds that one of the two of them steps down.
Or both, right? Yeah.
At the end of the term. Yeah, or both.
So, Harry, look, one of the things that we have definitely noticed here is Trump rules by executive order. He's governing by executive order, not by policy. It's all executive orders.
That's
and
right.
he just literally signed one that pulled federal funding from both NPR and PBS. He did this under the guise that it was the move to fight elitist propaganda, which he also somehow connected into national security. But as the New York Times had pointed out, this move is largely symbolic. Question I want to ask you is this more about chilling free speech than cutting costs? And most importantly, something I have been screaming bloody fucking murder from the rooftops of every building that I can get up on top of.
Including Yale Law School, where you were lionized last week. Everyone came out to see Michael Cohen.
I sure was. But when I say screaming from the rooftops about the violation of First Amendment protections for free speech, be it individual or public institutions.
Yeah. There's no doubt of the right answer here. It's not money. It's not even much money. It's obviously content. And I don't think Trump listens to NPR, just like he doesn't ever read a book. I think it's just part of this cultural zeitgeist for him. Wrong word in his case, but that's the woke liberal Subaru driving, or however they see it, and however he channels these sentiments from the heartland. Look, it's true. You've been on NPR. They are fastidious about trying to not be political, but who listens to them? I would be very happy if the only voters, practically, not legally, right, the only voters in next election were the NPR listeners. There's something to that. Of course, there are stations that people on the right tend to favor. I don't think there's the slightest doubt that what he's doing is trying to punish them and uproot them because they're seen as part of this liberal elite looking down on the heartland kind of stuff. It's probably not true or accurate, but that doesn't matter.
It's not going to stop
and yes, you're right. But in that sense, it matters legally in two ways. First, we're talking again appropriated money. Where the hell does the executive, who in very broad constitutional terms executes the laws that Congress passes, get off just writing out? We litigated this before. Can a president just do a line item veto and say, I know Congress passed it, but I'm not going to enforce it? The short answer is no, with a few kind of asterisks. National security sometimes being one. If you can totally make that claim. By the way, quick aside is the Voice of America. A judge ordered it reinstated, and he's tried to pull the plug there as well. But so back to NPR, two things. Viewpoint or at least content discrimination for sure in his mind. And then second, again, this appropriated money from Congress. So this is part of a really broad theme with these executive orders where he thinks he can just override law and be the final word after Congress, notwithstanding the clear constitutional structure. So that's building to something. Of course, in so many of these, if he can succeed, these procedural things I've talked about are really matter on the ground. Because if he can succeed, say, in making NPR go dark while they decide if it's constitutional, That's a terrible body blow for NPR, and listeners get out of the habit, etc. He's done a lot of things where just his doing them until they're decided to have been unlawful really, enacts a lot of damage. The number one thing to me of late here is the transgender ban of military service. Totally unconstitutional, I think, but by the time we'll know that, their lives may have been upended.
Yet
so
he has the goal, the unmitigated goal, to prevent somebody who has already put on the uniform to protect the Constitution, to protect America's Democratic Republic, when he was the guy who got the fake 4Fs, right, based upon bone spurs. It's so everything.
And based on this notion, by the way, this idiot notion that, because all he did was issue this order that basically said transgender people, honest to God, this is read it, Michael, your listeners should be appalled, are dishonest in some way, and that's the problem with their serving in the military. And when you talk about a guy who is Mr. Fraud and Mr. Serial Sexual Assailant, it's just mind-bending.
Harry, like you, I recently started a Substack, and by the way, Harry's Talking Fed Substack is fantastic. By the way, I subscribe to it, and I'm going to ask all my listeners to subscribe to it. But I put one out this morning. I hope you can get a chance and read it. First of all, it's extremely poignant, but like me, it's fucking hysterical. And I call it.
But you're not poignant, Michael. You're hysterical, but not poignant, right?
That's also true. And I call it, "This ain't the Godfather, morons," right? Let's get real. Donald Trump isn't a politician, a patriot, or even a leader. He's a gangster cosplaying as a savior, a knockoff mob boss in a red tie with a spray tan that could blind you from outer space. And yet millions worship him. And yet
that's pretty good. I'm looking for my fire emoji here.
All right, take it easy. Hold on a second. And yet millions worship him like he's Vito Corleone risen from Mar-a-Lago. Why? Because America, or at least a frightening chunk of it, has a soft spot for gangsters, especially the ones who talk tough, punch down, and promise revenge. I want to give an example. Like, think about it. The Godfather, Michael Corleone, he starts out clean, the war hero, right? But by the end, he's morally bankrupt, alone, and has his own brother murdered. Take, for example, Goodfellas. Henry Hill gets everything, money, power, women, but it ends with him ratting out his friends and living the rest of his life eating egg noodles and ketchup. And in The Bronx Tale, Sonny, the neighborhood boss that everyone idolizes, gets shot in the back of the head over a beef that he thought was buried. That's the cost of the life. That's the price of playing the villain. Now, while Trump skips the tragic ending, at least that's for now,
so far,
this is the entire issue here. For whatever the reason is, and it's why I say to Harry, I say to the folks over at Midas Touch Network, I say to everybody who has a real significant voice, who has a significant number of followers and subscribers, there is only way that we win this fight. There is only one way that you put the villain where he belongs, and that is for us to vote all of these bastards out of office. Because truth be told, there is no reining in their drunk power that they so right now crave. I watched the Oval Office with these enablers, these sycophants standing there around. They stand there to show as if he's got a force around him. He has a wall of impervious people. These folks, all they do is sit there. Mr. President, thanks to your courageous leadership that only you and only you could possibly have ever even dreamed of, as America has been ripped off for hundreds of years. If it wasn't for your bravery and pushing the envelope, we would never be here today fighting with the UK, getting the UK to concede to certain things when nothing for nothing, fuckface. We have a trade surplus with the UK, right? Do your fucking homework before you go out there. He needed desperately a win. And talk about things that are shitting up this presidency right now. the press uncovered that Trump's Department of Homeland Security, they're planning to deport African and Middle Eastern asylum seekers now to Libya, despite it being a failed state with active slave markets. Libya is on America's banned list, and yet, right? This is what they're intending to do. Does this violate international law, like the principle of non-refoulement under the Refugee Convention?
Oh, okay. A lot in that question. Let me just start by saying I applaud your approach to history through Scorsese movies. I don't know if many people know this. My first job out of college was basically getting coffee for him and De Niro and working for that family. Do people know, by the way,
that do people know that you were actually being cast to be Michael Corleone instead of
right, exactly. Well, everyone does know, I think, that Francis Ford Coppola had to really fight for him. Nobody wanted Pacino once they saw it. No, but I was the schlepper for coffee, etc. So I applaud that view, and I think he's a genius anyway.
Genius.
That said, though, I think I was also a prosecutor, and I saw some mob stuff up close. And your basic point of it looks like a kind of a power, and the sort of nasty Trumpian kind of power, the power to whack somebody. That's what people really see as to humiliate. And when you really do push on it, and his version is in his little room watching Fox and other thing and eating the double cheeseburgers. It really is a desolate life. All right, but that's easy enough for us to say. In terms of international law and Libya, and in terms of let's go there because we've talked about tariffs in the UK. You're right. The State Department says, don't go there casual. Don't even go to Tripoli as a tourist. It's not simply, they've set up these places with the cooperation of the EU in order to deter people from trying to migrate to Europe. These are, CCOT is sort of in El Salvador, state of the art, high tech hellhole. These are low level, total dilapidated hellholes, but what happens in the prisons and the conditions. So, this basic notion that we think somehow this is a big legal battle that's coming. You could take the worst guy ever who's been chosen to be the worst guy ever. They still have constitutional rights, and you couldn't put them in the public square and give them lashes or hang them the way they did, for Saddam Hussein.
According to Trump,
the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment, Mr. Trump. You cannot, that's cruel and unusual punishment, and that goes for presidents as well. So we are going to be facing this issue, not in terms of, international law, we resist, don't recognize, and the court is normally behind. But you can't just take the worst guy, and here we're talking about people who haven't been proven to be, in any way, deserving of punishment. But if they were, you nevertheless can't, literally they've chosen Libya and CCOT with enthusiasm. I know we'll take these migrants and make examples of them. Forget about people who are in this country, Michael. I think aliens, illegal, have certain constitutional rights.
Well, it's a misdemeanor, by the way. It is a misdemeanor violation to cross into the country.
That's who they're getting. Yeah, illegally. All this talk from Trump. We're getting the murders. They don't have any. It's all the low hanging fruit of people, and they're showing up. By the way, the main thing they're getting, as best I can tell, are people who are doing the right thing, showing up to ICE and then getting detained. But anyway, forget international law. People will try it, but I don't think it'll get a lot of purchase in the federal courts. But just national law, highest law, Constitution. Where do we get off, doing this? Now, of course, there's this totally terrible problem that's completely of the administration's own making, of the people who are already there and getting them back. But there should be, I think, a clear line drawn by the courts. You can't just, it's no answer to what their lawyers are saying. I'll just finish the sentence to say, oh, these are really bad guys. Even if they are, this is the United States and the Constitution applies. Sorry, go ahead.
When I was listening to this, and then I had to go grab the articles onto it, and all of a sudden I heard Libya. I was like, "There's no way in the world that
What's next?"
The reporter had to have gotten this wrong, because, in fact, our State Department has issued a do not travel advisory to Libya. So yet now you're going to take a group of people simply based upon their ethnicity or their country of origin, and
or your suspicion, but unproven to a court. Yeah,
correct. And how you're going to ship them off to Libya? I'm saying to myself, I thought at first that I was either hearing something, or I know when I read it, I had to read it twice. I was like, there's no way in the world. I want to touch on it.
We've all had that experience these last few months, haven't we? Oh, they couldn't do shit. They're doing it,
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you almost can't make this stuff up. I'll tell you, I was watching television the other day, and I was stunned to see Trump's economic advisor, John, what's his name, Besant, on CNBC, legitimately, like Porky Pig, right? Unable to answer.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Thank you. Unable to answer whether tariffs are paid by consumers. He literally fumbled. He pivoted. They did it to him when he was also on the stand, before Congress. Can you do me a favor, being the genius that you are? Explain to me and my listeners, why the fuck does this lie persist? And how can the courts...
What lie specifically, Michael?
The lie that tariffs are not paid for by consumers?
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
This episode of Mea Culpa is brought to you by Graza, my new favorite olive oil. It's fresh, it's never blended, and it comes from a single type of olive, the Picual, straight out of Jaén, Spain, where over half of the world's olive oil is produced. So why Graza? Single origin goodness, that's why. Only one olive from one region. No mysterious blends. That means a traceable, a fresher product without mixing in any low grade or unknown oils. It's super fun. It has squeeze and spray bottles too, so there's no more messy tins or drippy spouts. Just aim, squeeze, and go. I mean, there are 3 types for any task that you have. One, they have something called frizzle. That's their newest, with a higher 490-degree Fahrenheit smoke point, which is perfect for frying, crisping, or grilling. Sizzle at 410 degrees Fahrenheit, which is an everyday cooking oil for roasting, marinating, and sauteing. Then they have something called drizzle, which is a bold, a punchy finishing oil that you sprinkle on your salads, you dip your bread in, or even you top it off on your ice cream. Look, let me be clear. My daughter is the actual chef in the house, and she uses olive oil on everything, from pastas to preparing steak. I mean, not only does this cook well, it smells delicious. Plus, as a healthy eater, Graza's extra virgin oils, they are loaded with those heart and brain friendly polyphenols. So it's good for you. Look, so here's what you get. You get 10% off your first order on Graza's site. But I personally suggest grabbing the trio. That's all the 3 squeezy bottles, the sizzle, the frizzle, and the drizzle, so that you're set for every style of cooking. So head right now to graza.co and use code Cohen to get 10% off of trio, which includes, again, sizzle, frizzle, and drizzle, and get to cooking your next chef quality meal. Again, head to Graza, graza.co, and use code Cohen, Cohen, to get 10% off the trio. And I love saying it, sizzle, frizzle, and drizzle. So get cooking now. And how courts might someday have to adjudicate whether economic misrepresentations by the executive branch are actionable.
I think I can, actually. Let's start here. There is no constitutional bar, and if there were, can you imagine if they're against against a president lying flat out, against looking into the camera and saying, night is day and day is night, because we've got a whole presidency of lies. I always start there, always say there is the lie there. But here there is the news. It's a little underdeveloped, but the news is good in the sense that when the court's been called on to say, is this a tax or not? And we know for sure right there in Article 1, if it's a tax, nothing is more preeminently the bailiwick, the lookout of Congress. And what they basically have said is a tax is as a tax does. So that is, it's a practical test, and the administration can come in and say all it wants about it for national security or whatever reason, we want to call this not a tax. And the court's precedent, you have a court that's a little bit up in the air, but the court's precedent is strong. What are the incidents, as the lawyers put it, of a tax? And you can't tax, but just under a different name, just sort of dress it up and write not tax on the front. So here I can tell you the law is, and it's going to come up, because taxing, Congress. Not taxing, maybe Congress, but certainly taxing, Congress. So that'll be served up, and you'll have law. You'll maybe even have battles of experts and that kind of stuff. But a tax is as a tax does. And when you and I pay, and everybody pays sales tax, which hits disproportionately on consumers, or big income tax, or capital gains tax, or whatever the tax code, which looks like this, assesses. That's for Congress to decide on. And, that's going to be a very pragmatic, realistic, on the ground kind of analysis by the courts. Is that, this one's too important to muck with, as it were. Yeah. It's like, it walks like a tax, quacks like a tax. It's a tax.
Got it. So look, I was reading the New York Times, and they literally reported the other day there was a third near collision at another major U.S. airport just this week alone. The electronic systems went down for like 3 minutes, and that's the entire system. Then there was glitches throughout the entire, to the point that a whole group of air traffic controllers ended up taking a medical leave, literally a medical leave, because they were so freaked out. Airplanes coming within the danger zone of one another. They are now, and I mean, when I'm talking about the FAA, they are pointing to staffing issues following Trump's, drastic DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency cuts.
Yeah.
This is really not a joke. At what point?
Oh my God! No, there's going to be disaster.
Yeah.
And I hope you won't be offended as a tri-state member, but I already felt, don't go to Newark Airport unless you have to.
So,
and Newark Airport takes on all these extra. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the question I really want to ask you is really, at what point does this sort of administrative defunding, which is what they did, they are placing us, which, as you were semi-comically trying to say, don't go to Newark. It's not just Newark. It's every airport. The question I really want to ask you is, at what point in time does this kind of administrative defunding become a public safety liability that invites legal action? I mean, what happens when somebody gets hurt? This is the responsibility. We can call it respondeat superior if we have to. They knew by defunding this that you are going to cause a problem. They did cause a problem. Now, I know it's always tough to sue the government. Trust me, I know. But at some point in time, this defunding, it's not just stupid, it's dangerous.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of things. First, you're right. and it's been aggravated. I want to say this a little bit like the immigration system. It was already, to be fair, it was already broken going in. Buttigieg tried a lot and successfully. I don't know why there's this historical trend. Maybe it dates to Reagan, who went after the air traffic controllers, but there's been fewer and fewer air traffic controllers. In the last 4 years, it finally began to go up some, but everyone would say our staffing is really lamentable. That's for starters. It's getting better, but still you need many more. And then Trump, of course, with the way he has, and Doge have, indiscriminately just cut out some pieces, is a bigger problem. The FAA, there are quotas for how many flights, but they don't have ceilings for the large part. So didn't mean, well, jocularly, I do Newark Airport, but even without it, they've crammed in all these extra flights there, more than the formulas would normally permit to happen. But to your legal question, and of course, this is one of those cases where the law, at its best, even if it were fully responsive, can't solve the problem, right? Someone's going to maybe die, or many people, in a terrible crash. And the most the system can do is dole out some money. But here you're going to have respondeat superior, your right to name it, meets immunity. And there's, in fact, if there's a crash and you can show, and that's already, it'll be a big fight, it somehow traces directly to the staff cuts and the like, you might get some money from the U.S. government, but the Trump and the FAA or whoever is going along with it will, in fact, not be able to. They won't be liable because of different immunity.
I mean, to me, it just sounds.
But all this is right. It's so legal. The law stuff is so secondary here. I mean, my God. Again, what country have we become? I never used to worry about flying that I'm going to crash, and you're like we're all living airplane now. It's going up there, and things are coming right past us, right?
It's become like massive gross negligence, the way I see it. But Harry, look, the hour unfortunately goes by too fast because I got about 8,000 more questions to ask you. Okay. So, as a final, I want to ask you this. Of course, you will. That's what I love about you. If Trump's second term continues down this path of institutional annihilism, what's our legal off-ramp?
Yeah. Okay. So I've thought about this a lot, and this may be a longer conversation for me to come back. But I mean, question one's going to be, will Congress stay supine, and will the courts, as I'm worried they'll do in the transgender cases, actually let him effectively do things without review, or always have to think about this, they're still talking about it, will the court step up and Trump nevertheless says, screw you, I'm going to deny you? That is the sort of full-on white-hot constitutional crisis. My view here, I've thought about it a lot, but it's just one person's view looking in, through a glass darkly into the future. But I don't think he's going to make it. I have a very dark view, as I express day to day, about all the shit he's doing, and that's largely what I try to explain in the Substack. Thanks for mentioning it, YouTube, etc. But when you look at the history of democracies that have turned and become tyrannical, basically there's first Nazi Germany, but also Hungary. There's first all these changes to the law. And then the tyrant, assumes full on tyranny. I do think that what's left, if all that's by definition, by hypothesis gone, state and federal power, but mainly the people. But the people, I mean, we're talking like, are you kidding me? This is, civil war or worse. But I just think the cultural inheritance that we all have, the ballast of I pledge allegiance to the flag. Everyone, 85% of this country thinks he should stay with the courts, etc. And I think he misplayed his hand. I don't think you can take us from still basically democratic to basically authoritarian at 40%. If it were 60, I'd be really afraid. But my basic feeling is if we're in that total Armageddon, which is what you're asking and defining, I think he can't get there because, the American people essentially will fight back. That's my view. So on the one hand, I'm very not pessimistic and negative about what he's doing, but I've thought about it a lot. I think we win this thing and he loses it. Of course, if that happens and when we come up above ground and dust ourselves off, we're going to see a government in particular and a society that is messed up and will take years to restore. But I believe that we will not, it's not the end of the democratic experiment. One person's opinion, but there you have it.
Yeah, well, let me say one way to ensure that, something I say in my Substacks, on my YouTube, here on Mea Culpa, join this community. Follow Harry Litman. Follow Michael Cohen. You see, eventually what will happen is when my Substack, when my social media platform grows to be 1 million people and Harry's is 1 million people, we will combine it for 2 million. You then take my touch with their 5 million, you have 7. And you keep adding the people that all work together anyway with our similar common message, which is Harry and I don't agree on everything. To those of you who know Harry and I, we disagree on things, and we've had some great discussions, conversations on stage and elsewhere. But one thing we both unanimously agree, that this democratic experiment called America that has survived 250 years needs to continue for at least another 250 years. And so with that, I say, please make sure to follow Harry on Substack, follow me on Substack, follow on all the social media platforms. The only way to ensure a blue tsunami, the only way to ensure that we win is by being active, being vocal, joining the community, and being brought up to date on facts, not the innuendo that you're getting day in and day out from that right-wing ecosphere.
And that's so well put. I almost want to shut up, but I just want to say, in this burgeoning community, you've got Republicans, you've got people who recognize what you said, Michael. Tax, abortion, all that stuff is so secondary to the existential stakes we have. And there's a lot of people to follow, but there is the growth of this independent community who, among other things, aren't beholden to people. We've seen with great disappointment, CBS, Washington Post, etc., the richest folding first and not being, reliable in the same way. So it is true. And I feel I had never heard of Substack, nor had you 6 months ago. And now, it's burgeoning. So
Harry,
anyway, always a pleasure to be with you. The hour goes fast.
You got it, my brother. I'll see you soon.